today. And with no further ado, I am going to turn it over to Carrie and Tracy for a presentation.
Right?
Okay, thanks.
Do more than you may have to.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Carrie, and I don't see Tracy's name anymore. There.
Right? Try. Try.
Tracy and I are going to share a screen with you that we're going to follow along together. Holly, we're having some interference by someone's.
Yeah, I know, I'm trying to figure out. Hold on just a second, folks. Hang on. Nature of the beast. I think I caught it. Okay. Okay.
Great.
Let's try this again. Also, I think if people, you can just be reminded, you can change the view of what you're looking at on the screen so that when Carrie and Tracy share the screen that you can choose to, I think, also see whoever's speaking. Is that the case, hopefully?
I believe so.
Okay. All right. So I think back to you. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay. So here we go. I'm going to share my PowerPoint now, and hopefully it'll go as planned.
I think I'm muted.
Make sure, Lisa.
Shh.
So, so thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to let Tracy begin introducing herself and this topic, and I'll join you again.
Yeah.
Hello. Hopefully you could see me. I can't see myself for some reason. So thank you all for being here. So we are going to be talking about suicide prevention. Carrie, if you could flip through the slide. So really it's about, you know, it takes a village. We're all in this together. Not one person is more important than another. That's why it's so important that we all know the warning signs, the risk factors, and how to help and where to go. Next slide, Carrie.
Hi.
So what we want you to know is why it's important. Also warning signs, risk factors, and what your role is on suicide prevention. Next slide. So like I said, we're all in this together. Teachers, family members, friends, parents, and also youth, which is they're the most overlooked resource. You know, I did a lot of focus groups on suicide prevention, and I would say the majority of youth felt like they go to their parents because they felt like they wouldn't understand what they were through. So I think the more we know what to say and really listen, the more our youth will come and talk to us. And really it's about talking to your youth about a trusted adult as well. So you could go forward, Carrie. So before we go into what suicide is and some statistics, I really wanted to talk about language. So I want to know some of the ways in which we talk about suicide that may seem insensitive, especially to those who have lost someone to suicide. So when we're talking about committed suicide, when we talk about commit, we usually think about committing a crime. So that's why we want to use the language died by suicide, because when someone's feeling suicidal, you know, they're feeling like there's no way out, and we don't want to use the word committed because it's very insensitive. I remember I was talking to a young lady whose brother died by suicide, and she said, I never really thought about my language and the way I spoke about suicide until I had someone die by suicide. We don't want to say suicide victim or a successful attempt. We want to say a person who died by suicide. And really because we don't think of suicide as successful, right? When we think about successful, we think about, I successfully completed my master's. I can successfully completed a course. And, you know, it really implies an accomplishment. And, you know, we don't want to think about suicide as an accomplishment. You know, I know these may seem like minor points, but I guarantee that they can make a big difference to many people who have lost someone by suicide. Carrie? Thank you. So I want you to go over some statistics. This is just to illustrate the importance of knowing the warning signs, how to help, and what resources are out there. So suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people. In the US, 1 out of 6 students in grades 9 through 12 is seriously considered suicide. 1 in 8 have actually made a plan. 1 in 38 have made a suicide attempt that required medical attention. So if we look at that in a different way, so say there's a class of 24 students. That means 3 have had a plan and 2 have attempted suicide at least once. And that's in one class of 24 kids. So that's very high. And that's why presentations like this are so important, that we know the warning signs, risk factors, and how to help, because chances are you know someone that's thought about suicide. So suicide rates among youth have increased 56% in the last 2 years, and suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the US. Approximately 123 Americans die every day by suicide. Females actually attempt suicide at a higher rate than males. Close to 800,000 people die by suicide every year worldwide. That's 1 person every 40 seconds, according to the World Health Organization. And they actually said by the end of 2020, instead of every 40 seconds, it could potentially be every 20 seconds. The LGBT youth seriously contemplate suicide at almost 3 times the rate of heterosexual youth. So these statistics are very alarming, and that's why I really appreciate everyone that's on the call today to help bring awareness to suicide, and really help individuals that are struggling out there.
So really what Tracy's statistics highlight is for us to really pay attention to the reasons in order to help reduce the risks or identify people who might be at risk. We need to know why. We need to know the causes of suicide. We need to look at some of the reasons, especially those reasons that are portrayed in public, might be different than what's actually really happening. There's so many different factors that can be taken into account when someone makes a decision to do what they're doing.
And Carrie, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think a lot of times when people think about suicide, they only think of the environmental factor, you know,
Yes.
a loss of a job, when really suicide most often occurs when there's several stressors and health conditions converging to create this experience of hopelessness, despair, helplessness.
Okay. So yeah, so basically there's a lot of other factors we're going to review that may
He froze.
Okay, I was wondering if that was just me. I think Carrie might have frozen. Are you there, Tracy?
I am here.
You want to take over till she comes back to us?
Sure.
Thank you.
So suicide is an attempt to solve a problem of intense emotional pain with impaired problem-solving skills. I guess we lost the PowerPoint, but anyway.
She'll be back.
Yeah. So in the past, when we talk about suicide, many times people say it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Now let's think of an example. So for instance, I have a 2-year-old lab I actually woke up this morning. My husband got up early, and unfortunately he woke me up. So I was up at 4:30. I took the dog out. He threw up in the crate. He had throw up all over himself. He was walking in it. By the time I cleaned that up, I was running late. I got stuck in the rain. So a lot of stuff happened. So if I was to tell my story to someone and they said, oh, they're all temporary problems, no big deal, you're overreacting, you might not want to share what's going on after you hear someone say that you're overreacting, and that we really just have to be mindful of how important listening really is. And I think it's also important that for a suicide person, that pain seems unbearable, emotional pain, physical pain, or sometimes both. So for a second, I'd like you to think back to the most physical pain you've ever been in. And at that moment, would you have been able to give someone clear and accurate directions? The pain makes ordinary thinking nearly impossible. So for a suicidal person, thinking becomes constricted at that moment of crisis, a state of intense tunnel vision where other options seem unavailable. So it's really understanding the perspective of the suicidal person. So they could come on, these feelings could come on intensely and can sometimes pass in minutes or hours. So it's really important about keeping people safe and helping them feel supported. So they can get through these critical moments. And there is evidence that putting time and distance between an individual who is suicidal and the means to take their own life could be a very life-saving action. That's why it's so important that we take steps when we know someone is struggling to help keep them safe. So I know you don't have the next slide, but it talks about what intense emotional pain feels like. So that could look like feeling worthless, helpless, hopeless, like being a loser, confusion, emptiness, desperation. Can anyone understand these feelings? Most of us, I would say at one time or another, have experienced some of these feelings. Imagine though, if someone feels a lot of those things all at once, it seems pretty overwhelming. And then we move on to what problems can seem unsolvable. So getting in trouble at home or school, being humiliated, loss of a relationship. So any transition from which a teen feels unprepared. So pictures of the brain in action show that adolescents' brains work very differently than adults. When they make decisions or solve problems, their actions are guided more by their emotions and less by thoughtful, logical frontal cortex. So despite its complexity, suicide could be prevented. Just like there are warning signs and risk factors for other health crises like cardiac arrest, we could learn the warning signs and risk factors that could help us to prevent people from dying by suicide. As with any other health issues, time can be a critical and life-saving measure. Typically, a life can be saved if you allow time for the person's suicide risk to subside or to get through that period of distress and to get mental help. To prevent suicide, we need to really identify persons who may be suicidal, as well as take an active role in connecting them to help before they take action on ending their life. Holly, is there any way I could share my screen?
You can absolutely share your screen. Do you know how to do that?
I do, however, I'm on my phone, so I don't think that's gonna work. Is there any way you could share it if I send it to you?
I will do my best.
So people don't.
Actually, Carrie had sent it. You know what? Carrie had sent it to me before. As you keep talking, let me look and see. Thank you.
Perfect. So risk factors that may impact suicidal ideas: having a psychiatric disorder or mental illness, family history of a mental illness, family history of suicide, having gender identity feelings without support, bullying, cyberbullying, sleep deprivation. I have to say, when I was in high school many years ago, I was actually bullied. And this was a time before social media. So I was able to get away from it when I actually went home. But now kids don't get an opportunity to get away from it. You know, there's studies show that kids or youth that spend a lot of time on social media actually have at least one risk factor for suicide. And also too, having a mental illness, the majority of people that die by suicide have a mental illness, diagnosed or even undiagnosed. How's it going over there, Holly?
It's going. I think I'm gonna, let's see if this is everyone's getting more money than more bang for their buck here. This is exciting. Let's see here. Testing my skills.
Okay, good.
Can you see it?
Yes, I can. Yay.
Okay, and tell me where you'd like me to help, where you'd like me to go.
You could go to slide 13.
I'm unable to see the number of the slides. How about you just, can you see if tell me to go forward or not?
Yep, that's it. You're good. So the most serious risk factor is making a previous attempt, having an organized plan, or having access to lethal means. And I think it's very important that even if a youth doesn't have an organized plan, it doesn't mean that the threat is any less real. Holly, you want to flip through the slide? Okay. So speaking, most people who are suicidal talk about ending their lives. This may be directly or indirectly. A person might say outright, or they might joke about it. You need to take it seriously. You know, some people might say that they have no reason to live. Others say that things that let you know that they might feel trapped or they're a burden. You know, I think it's important, before we even go on to the next slides, that if you see a change in anyone's behavior, to let them know that you see a change, because you're around these individuals a lot. You have a relationship with them. So if you see something, say something. You know, I had a lot of health problems for a few years, and, you know, doctors couldn't figure it out. I actually had a seizure 4 years ago, August 20th. And after that, I felt like there was no way to get past it, that things would never get better, that no one understood what I was going through. And it was just one more thing to deal with. And I couldn't deal with it. I felt like things were never going to get better and that it was hopeless. I remember after I had my seizure, I didn't get out of bed. And I have a history of depression. I was actually diagnosed with depression in high school. And, you know, I have to say, I can't say enough about having support. And that support doesn't necessarily have to come from a family member. It could come from a friend. It could come from a teacher. You know, my coworkers were really there for me during this difficult time. And it's okay to not know what to say. You know, just listening and saying, you're not alone and I'm here for you, are so powerful. I remember my friend used to text me every day after it happened, and she used to check in with me. She used to say, hey, how about I come pick you up? We go for a ride. And I was like, no, I don't want to do any of that. And she was like, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm just laying here in bed. Like, I don't want to get out of bed. family will all come and lay with you. So it's any way that you could offer support. And even though you think it may not be something huge, it's meaningful to them. Holly, you want to go to the next slide?
Sure.
Okay, so behavior. Behaviors that are atypical for an individual should also encourage you to speak to that person about what you're noticing. So increased use of alcohol or drug use, increase with sleep, acting reckless, withdrawing from family and friends. And I think that second piece is really important when we talk about youth. So withdrawing from friends. Let's be honest, no one wants to hang out with their parents, their family. When
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm just going to ask all the participants to please check your mute. I hear background noise, and because I'm sharing the screen, I'm unable to see who it might be. So please be mindful that you need to have your settings on mute so that we might hear Tracy better. There's some background and rustling that's interfering with our ability to hear her. Go ahead, Tracy. Sorry.
That's okay. So not participating in activities, looking for ways to kill themselves, giving away personal possessions, neglect of hygiene. Next slide, Holly. So mood. So we've all had our ups and downs in mood, but when you notice a change that seems uncharacteristic or concerning, it's important to speak to that person about what you're noticing. So for example, sudden unexplained happiness can indicate the individual has decided on a plan and is relieved that they will no longer be in pain. So it doesn't necessarily mean from going happy to sad. It could also be going sad to happy because that individual has found a way out from those feelings of hopelessness and worthlessness. In some of our presentations, Carrie and I actually show a video of Kevin Hines, and he's one of the 1% of individuals who have jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and has survived. And he talks about how he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and a few days before his attempt, his mood dramatically changed, where he went from feeling very manic to feeling very calm and mellow. So that's also another example of how your mood can change and a change in that behavior. Next slide, Holly. Now, are you able to click on that video?
Oh, we'll give it a go. Everybody's feeling brave. Here we go.
I might have symptoms, just like anybody else.
Maybe more than anybody else.
It can be hard to figure out.
I like my privacy. I don't want you looking over my shoulder.
But you know your kid better than anybody else. And if you think he's acting different than usual,
Acting really down, crying all the time for no good reason.
or getting really mad, not able to sleep, or sleeping too much,
Shutting her friends out or giving her stuff away.
acting reckless, drinking, using drugs, staying out late,
Suddenly not doing stuff she used to love.
or doing stuff that's just not like him.
It might be nothing to worry about. It might just be high school.
Or it might be something more. He might be depressed, not just feeling down, really depressed.
It might be that your kid is thinking about killing himself. It happens. More than you think. More than it should.
And people say, I had no idea.
I thought it was just a phase he was going through.
I never thought she'd do it.
I wish he'd come to
I
me.
wish he'd said
I
something.
wish I'd said something.
When it's too late. So if you think your kid's acting different, if she seems like a different person, say something.
Say, what's wrong? How can I help?
And ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself? It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, it helps.
When people are thinking about killing themselves, they want somebody to ask. They want somebody to care.
Maybe you're afraid you'll make it worse if you ask. Like, you'll put the idea in their head.
Believe me, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, the best way to keep a teenager from killing herself is to ask. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
And what do they say? Yes.
Or maybe.
Or sometimes,
Well, here's what you don't say.
That's crazy.
Don't be such a drama queen.
You're making too much of this.
That boy's not worth killing himself over. It's not going to solve anything.
You're just trying to get attention. You're not going to kill yourself. What you do say is,
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad. How can I help? We'll get through this together.
Let's keep you safe.
a lot of people think about killing themselves, adults and kids. Most of them never try it, but some of them do. So if your kid says,
I'd be better off dead. Can't live with this.
I'm going to kill myself, take her seriously. Find someone she can talk to about it. Someone who knows how to help.
Sometimes kids want to kill themselves because something happened. A breakup, a failure. But sometimes it goes deeper, and it's not going to go away by itself. Get some help. Talk to your doctor.
Or a counselor at school.
Or your minister.
But don't just let it drop.
And make sure that your kid always has someone to turn to. Someone he trusts. Make a list together. Write them. 3, 4, 5 names.
Put a suicide hotline number on there too.
Have him keep that list in his wallet, so he always knows where to turn.
Be sure your home is safe. If you have pills she could use to hurt herself, lock them up.
If you have a gun, don't just lock it up. Get it out of the house. The bullets, too.
And one more thing. If you think your kid might be about to hurt himself, don't leave him alone.
Take them to the emergency room.
Call 911 if you have to.
We all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it's more than that.
If you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask. Ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Don't wait until you're sure.
Thank you, Holly.
You're welcome. Let's
Some-
see how we do. Let me see if I can figure out how to go back. I think Carrie may have rejoined us. Are you back, Carrie?
Video.
Hello, can you see
Oh,
me?
you're back.
Up. Carrie, do you want to share or do you want me to continue? It's up to you.
You can continue sharing the PowerPoint, and I can take over my section here if Tracy wants me to. I'm so sorry. I had to get on my own personal phone because the disconnection wouldn't reconnect.
Well, happy you're here. I will do the share in 1 moment. I'm just going to assign a co-host to help me watch the mute. So, Tracy, why don't you bring her up to speed with what we did
Okay, sorry.
and
for
where we
some-
are.
On my work phone, I just lost video. But anyway, so we, don't you love technology? So,
Yeah.
Carrie, we just
So
watched the Let's Listen Teens.
I see that.
And I was just about to say that there's a piece in that video that I absolutely love where they talk about writing down your supports and keeping that with you. I think that's so helpful, not just to youth, to anyone, that we know who we could turn to for support. And when we're feeling really down and we're feeling that we don't have anyone in our lives, that there are people that we could turn to and reach out to for support.
Great. Yes. I caught the end of the video, and it's an excellent video. That's right when I tuned back in, of course, when my section was all over. So, okay.
Oh, go ahead.
You want me to go from here, or do you want to say anything else?
No, I'll just jump in whenever I have something to say.
That's how we work, right? Okay, so in the video, you might have heard some of real good tips on what to say and how to say it. So this slide, we just want to make sure we emphasize the fact that we should not be afraid to ask the question, right? You'd rather get a no answer than a chance to miss that chance to help someone. So sometimes people worry that when you ask the question, you're planting the idea in the person's mind. So we really need to remember that people don't wake up one day and just decide to take their lives. They've been thinking about it, and this question might give them the opportunity to talk about how scary the thoughts are for them. Okay, so it's not like you're going to give them a new idea. And we need to also remember you're not responsible for getting them to feel not suicidal. our job is to help them be safe until this feeling passes. And if it doesn't pass, get them the professional. So sometimes, you know, sometimes they'll tell you things and ask you not to tell someone else. And so we also want to make sure that we never agree to keep that a secret. That when there's a danger to a life or to a student or to your child, that it threatens the life of others, we want to make sure that we don't keep any of that a secret. So if you're a guidance counselor, you could explain that this is, you know, the law requires me to talk to someone and maybe partner with that student who they would like to share this with. Is there someone, help them identify the trusted person in their life that would either be a professional or a parent that they would like to go to first, and but let them know that it's really your obligation to do something. So if a direct question, example of asking this question directly would be something like, have you ever been so unhappy lately that you thought about ending your life? You know, or there would be an indirect way to say it. When people are as upset as you seem to be, they sometimes wish they were dead. I wonder if you ever feel that way. You know, so that would be an example of how you could directly or indirectly get to that question. And if that seems really mechanical for you, or a leap to get to that question, you start with just, are you okay? So the next slide, if you could advance it for me, how to ask, are you okay? Start the conversation using these 4 steps, okay? If you don't want to ask about it, just make sure they know that you're concerned, make an observation about what you might see, and let them know that you're here to listen. And certainly, you know, follow up and make sure that you know that they're still okay after your contact with them. Okay. Tracy, do you have anything to add to that slide?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Okay. So a way to get started, the last slide basically, you know, just helps us talk about ways that we can interact and things that we can say, like, I've been feeling concerned about you lately, or recently I've noticed some differences in you and this is what I see. How are you doing? You want to talk about it? And, or I wanted to check in with you because you haven't seen yourself lately. So some of those are just ways to start the conversation. And then you might get to those other direct or indirect ways based on what you see or hear from the teen that you're talking to. So what we want to make sure we let you know is that, you know, what you say can make a difference to someone else, right? What you say, things that you can say that are helpful are, you're not alone, I'm here for you. I may not be able to understand exactly how you feel. Now, this is a really important thing to say, is we don't want to say, even if we've had some experience or have had thoughts ourselves that are that depressing and where we may not have wanted to live as well, we don't want to assume that we know exactly how the other person feels. But you always want to say, you know, I may not be able to understand you exactly what you're going through or how you feel about this situation, but I do care about you and I want to help. Okay. I'm sorry you're feeling so bad. We'll get through this together. I'm here for you and I'll help you until you feel safer or better. Those are good things to say. So I hope that the part that I missed while you were all discussing Tracy's presentation, I hope that was, you know, a good way to wrap up this luncheon with you. The next slides, I think, gives you some things not to say. Another way to talk about to the person is to keep in mind that you don't want to say things that lead them to believe that it's not such an alarming situation. You want to let them know that you're taking it seriously. So you don't want to make light of it by saying, oh, everything will be okay. You don't want to I think that let them know that by next week it's all going to be gone and it's nothing. So we want to make sure you are taking it seriously and show them and express them in other ways that this is important to you. So as we said in earlier slides, the content may have covered things that are less empathetic to say. Like, you don't want to silver lining the whole thing. You don't want to say that this at least things could be worse. You always want to let them know that this is, you recognize how painful it really is, even if the situation to you doesn't seem to be enough to warrant such drastic thoughts and feelings that they're having. So saying cheer up might make them think that it's too simple. Okay. And saying that they have so much other things to be thankful for kind of minimizes the pain they're feeling about the situation they're in. So you want to avoid saying that. And we also want to avoid telling the person that thinking about how your family would feel if this happened to you, that will just make them feel worse, because they probably have thought about that already, or they might be in too much pain to consider that a reason not to, because they're so uncomfortable. And so this just makes them feel worse if they're thinking, and sometimes some of these things are naturally what we say because we think it's helpful. We think it will keep them from acting, but our job is to really be with them and keep them safe, and not giving them a will to live, because that has to come but through them. That has to come by getting past what the situational pain is being caused by. Okay. So we wanted to say that before we wrap it up. I'm glad I got that slide in. But making sure that contact with a caring adult is the most significant protective factor. So making sure that you can be, or you get them to someone who is that protective factor. It could be you. Letting them know that you are there for them is huge in the process of this, and keeping them safe during a time when they could be thinking about ending their life is all that your goal is looking for safety, that person could. And I think Tracy and I both wanted to end up with some help resources. The next slide. If you can move on to the next slide, we have there you go. Hotlines, the New Jersey Mental Cares, and services like ours, the Mental Health Association of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Mental Health Association of Essex and Morris is where Tracy and I are from, and some other suicide hotlines. Then there's national hotlines for mental illness, depression and bipolar, Mental Health America. All of these can be kept for your resources and provided to anyone you think could benefit from using them. And the last slide shows our contact information for Tracy and I. One thing I want to do is to add, in the beginning when I started presenting, I wanted to make sure I gave you the proper link before we end. Someone had a question about our evening presentation tonight that we're doing for Intensive Family Support Services. That's the program that I'm from. And we're having a program tonight on caregiver limit setting. And if someone was interested, and if any of you who are still on would like that link, I'm going to make sure it's correct in the chat, because I'm afraid that I may have copied and pasted incorrectly. So I'll just make sure that's done, and I'll paste it and post it in the chat today.
And Carrie, did you say what the topic of that presentation is?
Caregiver limit setting for people. The audience, the participants are coming from our program, mostly the families of loved ones whose adult relative have a mental illness. But it can be open to anyone here who feels that they could benefit from learning some tips on limit setting for someone that you're living with or caring for with a mental health condition.
Okay. That's great. Thank you, Carrie. So that will be in the chat. And if there's anyone who's not able to see the chat, just contact Family Partners and ask for Holly, ask for me, and I'll make sure that you get that link. And Carrie and Tracy also, thank you for, first of all, there's a lot of information. And I do see we had some comments in the chat that I'm going to share with you. Someone was asking, let's see if I can, I might not be translating this correctly. If you could address the clinical realm in a high school setting as far as addressing safety contacts.
So, you know, student safety contracts are an important tool for teachers to use in helping to prepare for and maintain a safe working environment. So, you know, it's a good idea to have parents or guardians sign off on the contract along with the student, have the parent be aware of the school's effort to establish and secure a safe working environment for their students. You know, and this action, you know, the student contracts make the parent aware of the importance placed on safety and the potential ramifications, you know, if the contract is broken, and also being aware of the policies and procedures with that specific school as well. I hope that answered the response. Carrie, did you want to add something?
No, I think that's exactly what we need to address.
Teresa, is that okay? Do you have additional question to go with that?
Yeah, I think you answered the question, and I also want to let folks know that we did share the Perform Care phone number in the chat, which is 877-652-7624. That's another number that's helpful to have on hand if you're seeking services or direction or help. But I also, we still have you for another 15 minutes or so, ladies. I wanted to lob out a question to you because you said something early on that really struck a nerve in the world that we live in at Family Partners, which is you tell youth to go to a trusted adult. And I think what we see often and have seen close up is that sometimes parents are locked, like they almost don't know what to do because the thought of your child having these thoughts or these emotions or fear that what you're going to do is going to push it in the wrong direction. I mean, what advice would you give parents? Obviously, I know you've given a lot in your presentation, but I mean, I think I liked in the beginning that you said that, you know, youth are a real source of strength in this challenge, and that we really, you know, are able to talk with them and empower them. But I think sometimes parents are a little frozen too. I mean, what could you add about that?
Well, Holly, I was going to get to that.
Oh, so sorry.
So
bring it on.
So, I think that's first, let me say that I feel like that's with everyone. So I've been in the field for over 20 years, and I feel like asking if someone's suicidal is very jarring sometimes and anxiety provoking. And we don't want to say the wrong thing when someone comes to us and says that they're feeling suicidal. But the fact that, one, they came to you, you are someone that they trust. And two, you're not there to solve the problem. You're there to listen, you know, with an open mind, listen non-judgmentally. And I feel like that could be hard sometimes, especially when there's parents, you know, and it's important to, you know where to turn. You know, as a parent, you're not a therapist. You're there to listen and to get your child or that youth the help that they need. And there's resources out there. You know, obviously, if the child is in immediate danger, you want to call 911. But there's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is awesome. Second Floor, which is specifically for youth that are in crisis, is a great resource. Here at the Mental Health Association, we're a resource too. We do information and referral here at our agency. You know, even if a parent or a trusted adult just wants to talk to us and you know, bounce some ideas off of us. But we at the Mental Health Association actually just launched a suicide prevention website.
Wonderful.
Yes. So as I said earlier, youth suicide is the second leading cause of death. And our goal really is that this website provide guidance, comfort, and hope to young people struggling with suicidal thoughts, as well as provide important skills, information, and resources to those who love and care about them. And the website, encompasses warning signs, practical ways to speak to a young person. Furthermore, it features testimonials from young people who have attempted suicide and from those family and friends who have been impacted. So I have to say, I think it's wonderful. I could be biased because it's been my labor of love for the last 4 months or so, creating the content for it. And that information is on the last slide of the presentation. And I think it's a great way for parents, even if a youth wants to start a conversation with a friend, I think it's a great resource because it talks about, what to say, even if it's a simple conversation, additional questions to ask, how to ask if a youth is suicidal, and where to go for help.
Is this, I'm trying to back up, Tracy. Do I have the right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. That's fabulous. And if I can ask kind of a follow-up question, Tracy, what advice can you offer, or what thoughts do you have on communities healing from a tragic loss? I mean, I think sadly, most of us are aware of communities, or perhaps live in a community where the unimaginable has happened. And I think there's so many different levels to the loss to suicide, the loss of a young person, the fear factor of no one saw it coming kind of thing. Like what can you recommend for communities in healing and moving forward? Because again, I think, parents really, of course, want to do the right thing, but they're also reeling from the impact of a very difficult event. Like, do you have any words of wisdom or insights regarding that scenario?
So I think that's why I think support is a wonderful thing. I think the more that we talk about what's going on, the more we reduce the stigma associated with suicide. So I think education is very important. I think just being a support to one another, because I think the statistic is that for every one person that dies by suicide, at least 100 people are affected in some way.
Wow.
So I think it's just coming together as a shared support to individuals, checking in with people, and education to reduce, like I said, the stigma behind suicide, and just educating people about the warning signs and risk factors and what to do, not only to help youth, but to help as adults as well.
Yeah.
We've had an increase. Obviously, you had given us the statistic earlier in the presentation about the increase in teen suicides. Do you see any positivity moving forward in this battle, as far as, are you seeing a change in the frequency of conversation or the resources available? Or I'm looking for a little hope, Tracy.
And there is hope, Holly. People are not alone out there. And I think, that we have to give people hope on a completely different tangent. I remember when I was diagnosed with depression, everyone was kind of like, you have to do X, Y, and Z. No one really talked about the hope of recovery. So I think that hope is so important. And I think the more we talk about it, the more it comes out of the darkness and comes into the light. And I think that's why, we started this website. We're starting this initiative to really educate individuals, not only on suicide with youth, but suicide with law enforcement, first responders, adults, because everyone's affected by suicide in one way or another.
Yeah, that's, I find too, and just as a general statement, and I'm watching the chat, I'll welcome any other questions or and observations, but it seems to me sometimes we as a community, need to be better just about being real with other people. I think there's a lot of fear of, I don't know if it's perceived weakness or under accomplishment or whatever it might be, but I mean, I think, you know, it's interesting for me being in a, you know, family support organization, and when I'm out in the community at a Chamber of Commerce event or whatever it might be, when I tell people what it is I do and who it is I work with and work for, almost invariably there's someone who has something personal to share that I think is probably difficult to share, but feels good to get off their chest, because I think, as you said, Tracy, we just don't give a space for these conversations that are awkward or make us vulnerable. So I just think the more that you don't have to wear your heart on your sleeve and be, you know, crying woe all the time. But I mean, don't you think as a society, we just need to be a little bit more maybe real and open with challenges?
Yes.
I don't know. What's the counselor's opinion on that?
I 100% agree, because I feel like, especially if as adults, we let our youth know that, you know, we've been feeling those feelings before. You know, kids go through this, adults go through this, you're not alone. There isn't something wrong with you because you're feeling this way. And I think that's so important, because, you know, even before I was diagnosed with depression, and when I was having suicidal thoughts, you know, you think that there's something wrong with you, and other people, you know, have the same feelings as you, and you're not alone, that things will get better, and there is hope, and there's people out there to support you.
This might be a random question, but I'm going to throw it out because I've got lunch with an expert. What about all of these? I don't know if anyone else has experienced this. I'm quite sure they have, but you've got medications out there that potential side effects may produce or increase suicide ideation.
Okay.
That's just like, that to me is something that's also frightening as a parent. Is that something that, you know, I think most of us who don't have letters after our name, who don't talk about suicide and deal with the many dimensions of it on a daily basis, that's terrifying. Do you have anything you can add to that or say about that?
When I actually had my seizure 4 years ago, the medicine I was on, that was one of the side effects. So not only was it one of the side effects, but it was also something that I was feeling because of everything that was going on, and the fact that I almost lost my teeth, the fact that I couldn't drive, the fact that, you know, I was having a hard time getting to work because I live in Sussex County and I work in Morris County, and, you know, Ubers would have cost me a fortune. So I think it's important when to educate ourselves, right, about the side effects of a medication. And when you're talking about an adult talking to youth, it's important to keep that line of communication open. So going over the side effects of the medication with the youth and saying, hey, listen, you know, if you're starting to feel hopeless or depressed, or if you're thinking about killing yourself, harming yourself, you know, I'm here for you. You know, we'll get through this together. Let me know. We'll talk to your doctor. You know, we'll see what he says. If there's something else we could do, a different medication, but just keeping that line of communication open and having that communication with your youth and letting them know that they could talk to you, and you'll be there for them. You
know, Tracy, I've read, as parents, we always want to have an answer, or as guidance counselors or educators. But I've heard that a very powerful statement is that simply, I'm here for you, and we'll get through this together. Is that, I mean, it sounds so very basic, but is that good advice?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You are not alone. I'm here for you. We'll get through this together. To have someone to lean on, to have someone that cares about you, really, there's nothing better. I have to say, even from my experience being suicidal a few years ago, I can't say enough about the power of support.
And maybe I'm beating a dead horse, but I just want to say, I think the power of support should be extended as well to the parents who may be a little overwhelmed with this scenario. I mean, we can be there for our children, but it's okay for others to be there for us as well. Because being a parent is not easy, and
being a parent who has concerns of this level with a child who is often the center of your universe is also a very difficult thing. So any parting words? I can't thank you ladies enough for the information that you've shared. We will make this presentation available through email to the folks that registered, and we just encourage you to keep the conversation going and to please look at all the wonderful resources that are included in this presentation. Tracy, is the second floor contact information available in your presentation?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Okay, excellent. And I'm just looking through some of these last minute comments here. Someone, Carrie did post the link to tonight's program. And before the program started, Carrie and I were talking, and I just want to encourage everyone Carrie and I were amazed at the amount of high quality presentations that are available virtually. That is the silver lining that we'll give today's pandemic. Silver lining is that there are so many experts who are available for us to listen to, for us to ask questions directly to, and to really consider taking advantage. I mean, tonight's program is one example of something that you may have had to travel to or signed up for. Maybe the room would be full, and I think now there's probably space in the room. Am I right, Carrie?
Yeah, it's excellent. I hope that we did cover enough of what you were talking about earlier when I was unable to be on part of the program tonight. We did highlight some of the questions you just answered. Tracy answered very well, but I wanted to make sure we emphasize that, just because you're getting some of this information on how to identify risks and how to talk to people doesn't mean you have to be the one to ask it. If you're highly emotionally involved, if it's your child, and you're talking a lot about that concern, is that not knowing what to do or what to ask, that if you just simply do what you said and say, that you're concerned and that you're there for them, and that I'll get any help you need to keep you safe. Those using those other resources or getting that support from someone else, even another friend or another adult that you think your child or your student would better talk to than you, that's helpful. You're doing enough. You don't have to be the whole 100% solution. Do it with someone.
Well, and I just want to repeat the suggestion that came out of your presentation as well, as far as the concept of helping your child come up with a list of people they can speak with, because the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, which I'm a big fan of, I know always helps folks identify people that they can go to. And, we have to remind ourselves that it doesn't have to be the parent. The parent doesn't always have to be the go-to person. It can be an aunt, a teacher, a choir director, an uncle, whatever it might be. But I think that was such a practical but powerful suggestion, because it hopefully will also empower the youth to realize that there are people who are okay if it's not happy news to get that call. So really, really excellent information, ladies. Can't thank you enough for being here with us today. And I will repeat again, we will be sending up a follow-up email with the recording. You can laugh at our little faux pas and how much we love technology and Tracy's skill and my surprising even myself. And I want to give a shout out to my coworker Lindsay and Diane, who are back behind the scenes helping me keep it together. But let's keep this conversation going. Our youth are worth it. And, there's a lot of growth to be had, I think, not only for the youth who are struggling, but also for the parents and caregivers and providers who are, we have a role to play, and sometimes it's a scary role, but together we can get through this. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Okay, terrific. So in closing, look for an email to follow. And also, I just want to remind everybody that Family Partners is working very hard to keep you connected virtually. We have 6 online support groups every week. We have 4 for parents. We have 1 in Spanish. We have 1 for dads. And we have 2 fantastic youth programs that meet for 13 to 21-year-olds, 1 on Tuesday morning and 1 on Friday night. And just keep the conversation going and keep the connections going. And just because we are all social distancing doesn't mean that we have to be disconnected. So thank you all very much for making us a part of your day. And hats off to Tracy and Carrie. Stay well.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.